My name is Mia Reynolds. I'm 32, a successful accountant in Boston, and I'm about to tell you how I learned the most brutal lesson of my life. Being the good daughter will get you absolutely nothing. But here's what happened when I finally said enough. If you're watching this, smash that like button, subscribe for more stories like mine, and drop a comment letting me know where you're tuning in from. Trust me, you'll want to hear what I did next. I grew up in Lexington, a nice suburb just outside Boston, middle-class family. Dad was an engineer. Mom taught part-time at the elementary school. From day one, there was a crystal clear difference in how my parents treated Dylan and me. I was 4 years older, which apparently made me responsible for everything that went wrong in his life. Mia, help your brother with his homework. Mia, why can't you be more patient with him? Mia, you need to understand he's younger. These phrases became the soundtrack of my childhood, playing on repeat, year after year after year. I busted my ass in school, 4 GPA, every club that would look good on college applications, weekends volunteering at the animal shelter while other kids were having fun. Meanwhile, Dylan barely scraped by with C minuses, but my parents celebrated his mediocre grades like he'd cured cancer. He tries so hard, Mom would say, ruffling his hair like he was some kind of hero. Not everyone is naturally smart like you, Mia. Naturally smart. That was their excuse for everything. My success was just genetics, no credit for the all-nighters studying, the social events I skipped for extra credit, the constant pressure I put on myself to be perfect. But Dylan, poor Dylan, just needed more support, more understanding, more money. High school graduation rolled around. I got accepted to Boston University with a partial scholarship, not full ride, but close. My parents sat me down for what they called an adult conversation. We can help a little, Dad explained, not quite meeting my eyes. But we need to save for Dylan's college fund too. He might need extra support. I nodded, swallowed my disappointment, lined up a part-time job at the campus bookstore, took out student loans, made it work like I always did. 4 years later, when Dylan got accepted to Northeastern, full ride. Tuition, room, board, everything paid by Mom and Dad. When I mentioned the obvious disparity, Mom just smiled that patronizing smile. You were always so independent, sweetie. Dylan needs more support to succeed. After college, I landed a position at Anderson Accounting, top firm in Boston, worked 60-hour weeks during tax season, took night classes for additional certifications, climbed the corporate ladder through sheer determination. By 30, I'd saved enough for a down payment on a small condo in Cambridge. Nothing fancy, but it was mine, bought without a single dollar of family help. Dylan's post-college trajectory, complete disaster. He bounced between jobs like a pinball, never lasted more than 6 months anywhere. The work environment was toxic, he'd whine. They didn't appreciate my creative approach. My parents nodded sympathetically every time. When Dylan was 27, he announced he wanted to open a craft brewery. Despite knowing nothing about brewing beer or running a business, my parents remortgaged their house to give him $200,000 in startup capital. The business lasted 8 months, nothing to show for their investment except debt. At least he tried, Dad said, patting Dylan's shoulder at the family dinner where he announced the failure. That's more than most people do. 2 years later, food truck. Another 50 grand from their retirement savings. Another spectacular failure within a year. Then came the artisanal furniture phase. Dylan decided he could build custom tables after watching YouTube tutorials. More money from Mom and Dad, more inevitable failure. Through all of this, I remained the stable one, got promotions, saved money. Built a reputation as one of Boston's top tax specialists. I dated occasionally but stayed focused on my career and financial security, always the responsible daughter, always hoping that someday somehow they'd finally see my worth. Then 3 years ago, everything changed. Dad called me on a Tuesday evening. His voice sounded different, hesitant, almost embarrassed. Mia, do you have a minute to talk about something serious? My stomach dropped. Is everything okay? Is it, Mom? No, nothing like that, he assured me quickly. It's just, well, the mortgage payment has gone a bit tough since I had to reduce my hours. Dad had been having heart problems, doctor's orders to cut back to part-time work. Mom was still teaching part-time, but their income had taken a massive hit. We hate to ask, Dad continued, but we're wondering if you could help us out temporarily, just until I can get back to full-time hours. Of course, I said without hesitation. How much do you need? $2,500 a month for the mortgage, property taxes, utilities, plus occasional extras for home repairs or medical bills insurance didn't cover. I never refused, even when it meant postponing my own condo renovations. Even when it meant cutting back on everything, dinners out, weekend trips, new clothes, I didn't mind, not really. They were my parents. I was in a position to help. But somewhere in the back of my mind, I wondered why Dylan wasn't contributing anything. He'd landed a decent job as a sales rep for a local brewery. But apparently his financial responsibilities didn't extend to helping our struggling parents. I never brought it up. Some pathetic part of me still hoped that by being the good, responsible daughter, I'd finally earn the approval I'd been chasing my whole life. For 3 years, I faithfully sent money every month without fail, even when my car needed expensive repairs, even when my condo building hit us with a special assessment for a new roof. I picked up extra tax clients on the side, worked through holidays for overtime pay. Budgeted every single dollar like my life depended on it. There were times I had to decline friends' invitations to weekend trips or after-work drinks. I'm on a tight budget right now became my standard excuse. Too complicated to explain, I was essentially paying a mortgage for a house I didn't live in for parents who clearly favored my deadbeat brother. But deep down, I fantasized about recognition. About a moment when they'd finally acknowledge everything I'd done. We don't know what we would have done without Mia, Dad would say in my daydream. She saved our home when we were struggling. We're so proud of the responsible, generous woman you've become, Mom would add. These imaginary scenarios kept me going through the lean months and the disappointments when family conversations still revolved around Dylan's latest schemes instead of my actual achievements. As an accountant, I could see their financial situation wasn't sustainable. Even with my help, they were barely staying afloat. Their retirement savings had been decimated by Dylan's failed business ventures. Have you considered downsizing? I suggested gently during one Sunday dinner. The house is really too big for just the two of you now. Mom looked scandalized. Leave this house, but all our memories are here, and where would we host Christmas if we moved to some tiny condo? Plus, Dad added, the market isn't great right now. We'd lose money if we sold. I bit my tongue instead of pointing out they were already losing money every month maintaining a 4-bedroom house they didn't need. I could help you create a budget, I offered. Financial planning is literally what I do for a living. That's sweet of you, honey, Mom said, patting my hand condescendingly, but we're fine. We've managed our money for 40 years. We don't need our daughter telling us what to do now. The irony that they were literally depending on their daughter's money to keep their home wasn't acknowledged. Despite these frustrations, I stayed hopeful, especially when Dad's health took a scary turn last year. He had a minor heart attack that triggered serious conversations about mortality and future planning. During one hospital visit, Dylan and I had a rare moment alone. This is scary, he admitted, looking actually vulnerable for once. I'm not ready to lose Dad. Me neither, I agreed, reaching for his hand. I know you've been helping them a lot, Dylan said, surprising me. With money and stuff, I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. It was the first time anyone had directly acknowledged my financial support. I should probably help more, he continued. Maybe we could split the costs or something once I'm more stable. That conversation gave me hope. Maybe my family was finally seeing reality. Maybe things would change. That hope grew when Mom mentioned they were updating their will. We want to make sure everything is taken care of properly, she said during one of our phone calls. Make sure everyone is provided for. I interpreted this as recognition of my years of support. Maybe they'd leave the house to both Dylan and me equally. Maybe they'd set up some arrangement that acknowledged my financial contributions. Never, not in my wildest nightmares, did I imagine what would actually happen. Dad's health continued declining over the next several months. What started as a minor heart attack revealed extensive cardiac problems requiring multiple procedures and increasingly powerful medications. 3 months ago, he was hospitalized permanently. During this nightmare, I practically lived at the hospital, took family leave from work, spent every day coordinating with doctors, managing medications, trying to keep Dad's spirits up. Mom was there too, but she found the medical discussions overwhelming. You handle it, Mia, she'd say. You're better at understanding all that medical jargon. Dylan visited occasionally. Usually for less than an hour. Always had some excuse to leave early work, plans with friends, or just feeling too emotional in the hospital environment. When he did visit, Dad would light up, asking about his job and social life while I sat quietly managing the practical aspects of his care. During these weeks, Mom mentioned several times that she and Dad had finalized their will. We've made sure everything is clear, she told me one evening. No confusion about what goes where, it's all taken care of. I assumed they'd made fair arrangements, maybe even included provision for me to be repaid the roughly $60,000 I'd contributed over 3 years. When Dad passed away on a quiet Tuesday morning, I was holding his hand. Mom had gone home to shower. Dylan was at work. It was peaceful, just a final exhale, then stillness. I called them immediately, then sat with Dad until the hospital staff needed to take him. The next week was a blur of funeral arrangements and paperwork. I handled most of it: obituary, funeral home coordination, managing the influx of casseroles from neighbors. Through it all, I continued sending Mom money. The mortgage and bills wouldn't stop just because we were grieving. 1 month after the funeral, we gathered at Jenkins & Associates, my parents' longtime legal firm. Mr. Jenkins welcomed us into a conference room with leather chairs and polished wood. I'm very sorry for your loss, he began, opening a folder. Theodore was a good man. Mom sat between Dylan and me, clutching a tissue. She seemed unusually nervous, smoothing her skirt repeatedly, avoiding eye contact with me. Dylan appeared oddly relaxed, leaning back with an expression I couldn't quite read. Mr. Jenkins began reading the will, starting with standard legal language. I listened carefully, waiting for details of how the estate would be divided. When he reached that section, the words didn't immediately register. And to my daughter, Mia Reynolds, I leave the sum of $5,000 in recognition of her achievements. I blinked. Sure, I'd misheard. $5,000. After everything I'd contributed, Mr. Jenkins continued. All remaining assets, including our family home at 1423 Maple Street, all bank accounts, investment portfolios, and personal property, I leave to my son, Dylan Barton. The room tilted. I gripped my chair arms, trying to steady myself. There were conditions, primarily that Mom would have lifetime rights to live in the house, but essentially everything was Dylan's. When Mr. Jenkins finished, he looked up. Are there any questions? I opened my mouth but couldn't speak. My throat had closed completely. I have copies for each of you, Mr. Jenkins said, sliding folders across the table. The $5,000 for Mia can be transferred immediately if you'd like. That would be fine, Mom said quickly, still not looking at me. Somehow I made it through the rest of the meeting on autopilot. Signed where indicated, declined the offer of water, even managed to thank Mr. Jenkins as we left. The drive home was silent. I dropped Mom and Dylan at the house, my parents' house, now Dylan's house, without speaking, then drove to my condo. Once inside with the door locked, I finally let myself feel the full impact. I sank to the floor of my entryway and sobbed until my throat was raw and my eyes were swollen shut. 3 years of supporting them financially, a lifetime of being the responsible one, and my parents had left me $5,000. It wasn't even enough to cover 2 months of the mortgage payments I'd been making. That evening, my phone exploded with calls and texts from Mom. I ignored them all, needing space to process this betrayal. Eventually, she left a voicemail. Mia, I know you're upset, but try to understand. Your father and I thought this was best. Dylan needs the financial security more than you do. You're already successful with your good job and your condo. Dylan's always struggled. We just wanted to make sure he'd be okay. Please call me back. I miss you. Her justification made the pain worse. I was being punished for my success, for my responsibility, for doing everything right. Dylan was being rewarded for a lifetime of poor choices and dependence. The next morning, I called in sick for the first time in 5 years. I couldn't face analyzing financial statements when my own family had so profoundly devalued my contributions. For the next week, I moved through my days like a ghost. Colleagues asked if I was okay. I blamed my distress on grief over Dad's passing, which was partially true. The full truth was too humiliating to share. When I finally answered Mom's calls, her first question wasn't about my well-being. Honey, I just wanted to check if you sent the money for this month. It hasn't shown up yet. No acknowledgement of the lawyer's office. No recognition of how hurtful their decision had been, just concern about when her money would arrive. I'll take care of it, I said flatly and ended the call. That weekend, I met my best friend Lisa for coffee. She was one of the few people who knew about my financial support. When I told her about the will, her outrage was validating. Are you kidding me? She exclaimed loud enough that people at nearby tables turned. After everything you've done for them, that's beyond unfair, Mia. That's exploitation. I don't know what to do, I admitted. Part of me wants to stop paying their mortgage immediately, but I can't just leave Mom homeless. Lisa's expression softened. Your mom is an adult who made this decision with your dad. She chose to leave everything to Dylan, knowing full well you've been supporting them for years. Maybe it's time she faced the consequences of that choice. Her words stayed with me. At work, I confided in my colleague John, who'd been through something similar. I paid for my sister's college while my parents paid nothing, he told me. Then when they sold their vacation property, they gave her half the proceeds and me nothing because I was doing fine financially. I had to set boundaries after that. What did you do? I stopped being their personal bank, he said simply. It was hard and they were angry at first, but our relationship actually improved once it wasn't about money anymore. That evening, I received a text from Mom asking for an extra $800 for property taxes. No please, no thank you, just expectation that I'd comply as always. Something snapped inside me. I opened my banking app and looked at my transaction history. Over 3 years, I'd transferred a total of $64,200 to my parents. 64 grand that could have gone toward renovating my condo, taking dream vacations, or building my own financial security. 64 grand my parents deemed worth less than a $5,000 inheritance. What made it worse was discovering through Mom's casual comments that my parents had substantial savings before Dad's death. Savings that now belonged to Dylan, along with the house I'd been paying for. It was crystal clear. I'd been exploited by the people who should have had my best interests at heart. The final straw came during a phone call when Mom mentioned Dylan's plans for the house. He's thinking of renovating the kitchen, she said cheerfully. New countertops, maybe those fancy soft close cabinets. That sounds expensive, I replied, trying to keep my voice neutral. Oh, he got money from your father's life insurance, and he mentioned you'd probably want to keep helping with the mortgage so we can afford nice things. I nearly dropped the phone. Dylan said what? Well, since you've been so helpful with the house payments, he just assumed you'd continue. It's not like your situation has changed. After we hung up, I learned from a family friend that Dylan had bought a new luxury car with Dad's insurance money. Meanwhile, he'd contributed exactly $0 to supporting Mom or maintaining the house that now belonged to him. I tried one more time to have a reasonable conversation with Mom. Met her at a neutral cafe, determined to express my feelings calmly. Mom, I need to talk about the will and the financial arrangements, I began once we were seated. She immediately looked uncomfortable. Mia, that's all settled now, there's no use rehashing it. But I've been paying your mortgage for 3 years, I persisted. Did that factor into the decision at all? That was your choice, she said, stirring her coffee intently. Nobody forced you to help us. But you asked for my help. Dad called me specifically. Temporarily, she said, and anyway, this isn't about money, this is about family. You've always been so materialistic, Mia. I stared at her in disbelief. Materialistic, Mom, I've given you over $60,000. I've sacrificed my own financial goals to help you keep your house. And we appreciated it, she said quickly. But Dylan needs the house more than you do. He's never been as fortunate as you. Fortunate? I repeated. I worked for everything I have, nothing was given to me. That's what I mean, she said, as if I'd proven her point. You're capable of taking care of yourself. Dylan needs more support. Right then, I realized nothing I could say would change her perspective. In her eyes, Dylan would always be the one who needed more, deserved more, regardless of his choices or my sacrifices. The conversation ended with nothing resolved. When I got home, there was a text from Dylan. Mom said you're being difficult about the house. Don't be selfish, sis. You know I've had a harder time than you. That was the moment I knew I had to make a change. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept reviewing every financial decision I'd made to support my parents, every sacrifice, every time I'd chosen their needs over my own. At 3 a.m., I got up and made tea. Then I opened my laptop and created a new budget one that didn't include $2,500 a month going to my parents. I was surprised to see how much more comfortable my financial situation looked without that burden. The next day, I scheduled a meeting with my financial advisor, Sarah. I've been supporting my parents financially for 3 years, I explained, but circumstances have changed and I'm considering stopping. Sarah reviewed my budget and goals. From a purely financial perspective, redirecting that money toward your own future would be beneficial. You've been putting off several important goals to help your family. But is it wrong to stop? My mom would still need to pay the mortgage. Your mother has options, Sarah pointed out. She could ask your brother for help since he now owns the house. She could downsize. She could get a roommate. These are normal solutions people in financial difficulty pursue. Sarah's practical perspective helped clarify my thinking. This wasn't about revenge or punishment. It was about establishing healthy boundaries and requiring others to take responsibility for their choices. That evening, I composed a carefully worded email. Dear Mom, after much consideration, I need to inform you that I will no longer be able to pay the mortgage or other household expenses starting next month. The last payment I will make will be on the 15th of this month, which should give you time to make alternative arrangements. I care about you very much, but recent events have made it clear that I need to redirect my financial resources toward my own future. I'm happy to discuss this further if you'd like. Love, Mia. Short, clear, no emotional accusations. I read it 3 times, took a deep breath and hit send. Then I temporarily blocked Mom's and Dylan's numbers. I knew the response would be immediate and angry, and I needed space to strengthen my resolve. The next day, I booked a week off work in a small cabin in Vermont where I could be alone with my thoughts, away from the inevitable family drama. I left 2 days later, driving 3 hours north with the windows down and music playing loud enough to drown out my doubts. The week in Vermont was healing. I hiked during the day, read books by the fireplace in the evening, slept better than I had in months. I journaled extensively, working through my complex feelings of guilt, anger, and grief. By the end of the week, I felt calmer and more certain of my decision. When I returned home and turned my phone back on, it exploded with notifications. 27 missed calls from Mom, 15 from Dylan, numerous texts ranging from confused to pleading to outright hostile. I started with the texts, scrolling through Mom's reactions. Mia, I got your email, please call me. Why aren't you answering? We need to discuss this. You can't just stop paying without warning. This is very irresponsible. What am I supposed to do? Dylan says you're being childish. Is this because of the will? That's very petty. I can't believe you would do this to your own mother after everything we've done for you. Dylan's messages were even more aggressive. What the hell, Mia? You can't just bail on Mom like this. Answer your damn phone, you're being ridiculous. This is elder abuse. You know Mom can't afford the mortgage alone. I swear if you don't start paying again, I'll make sure everyone in the family knows what you did. That last one made me laugh bitterly. Let everyone know what I did. How about letting everyone know what I'd been doing for 3 years while Dylan contributed nothing? The final straw was a group message Dylan had sent to several extended family members, painting me as an ungrateful daughter abandoning her widowed mother out of spite. My Aunt Carol had replied with a shocked message about how disappointed she was in me. It hurt to see how quickly I'd been vilified, but it also reinforced that I'd made the right decision. This family dynamic was toxic and needed to change. As the mortgage due date approached, Mom's messages became frantic. The day before payment was due, mortgage due tomorrow. If you don't pay, we'll default and lose the house. Is that what you want? I stared at the message for a long time, battling the urge to cave and send the money. But then I remembered the will reading, Mom's dismissal of my feelings, Dylan's new car, and the fact that he now legally owned the house I'd been paying for. I typed a response and hit send before I could second-guess myself. You chose, now pay. The explosion was immediate. My phone rang seconds later, Mom's name flashing on screen. I didn't answer. More texts flooded in from both Mom and Dylan, calling me selfish, cruel, heartless. Dylan threatened legal action. Mom said I was killing her with stress. I turned off my phone and cried. Despite knowing I was doing the right thing, it hurt terribly to be at such odds with my family. That night I called Lisa and sobbed through the whole conversation. You're doing the right thing, she reassured me. They're just upset because their cash cow is gone. They'll figure it out. What if they really do lose the house? Then Dylan will have to step up, Lisa said firmly. It's his house now legally, his responsibility, and if he doesn't, that's on him, not you. For the next month, I focused on myself in ways I never had before. I kept Mom's and Dylan's numbers blocked, needing space to heal and strengthen my new boundaries. Instead of sending money to my parents, I set up automatic transfers to my own savings, earmarked for the condo renovations I'd been postponing for years. I deepened friendships, saying yes to social invitations I would have previously declined due to financial constraints. Started yoga classes, even went on a few dates. Slowly, I began to feel like myself again, but stronger. My apartment became a sanctuary. I bought fresh flowers each week, something I'd always considered an unnecessary luxury. Hired a contractor to renovate my outdated bathroom using money that would have gone to my parents' mortgage. These small acts of self-care helped heal the wound of my family's betrayal. The silence ended abruptly when Dylan showed up at my office building. I was returning from lunch when I saw him in the lobby, looking disheveled. We need to talk, he said, blocking my path to the elevators. This isn't the place, I replied, conscious of colleagues walking past. If you want to talk, email me to set up a time. Mom is freaking out, he hissed, lowering his voice but not his intensity. The bank sent a warning about the mortgage. You need to start paying again. I took a deep breath. No, I don't. The house belongs to you now, Dylan. If you're concerned about the mortgage, you can pay it. I can't afford it, he exclaimed loud enough that people turned to look. Then perhaps you should sell the house and get something you can afford, I suggested calmly. That's what responsible adults do. His face flushed with anger. You're doing this to punish us. I'm not punishing anyone. I'm simply no longer paying for a house that doesn't belong to me. I've already contributed over $60,000. That's more than enough. You've always been so damn selfish, he spat. Only thinking about yourself. Mom was right about you. A security guard approached, having noticed our tense exchange. Is everything okay here, ma'am? No, I said clearly. This man is harassing me. I've asked him to leave, but he's refusing. Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to exit the building, the guard said firmly. She's my sister, Dylan protested. That doesn't give you the right to harass her at her workplace. Please leave now or I'll have to escort you out. Dylan glared at me but ultimately turned and stalked toward the exit. This isn't over, he called over his shoulder. The confrontation left me shaking but also strangely empowered. I'd stood my ground. I'd publicly declared my boundary. Most importantly, I'd made it clear that Dylan's problems weren't automatically mine to solve. Over the next few months, significant changes unfolded. Through the family grapevine, I learned Mom was seriously struggling financially. The mortgage payment had been missed. The bank had sent formal warnings. Dylan had refused to use any of his inheritance to help, claiming he needed the money for investments. Several relatives offered small amounts of assistance, but no one was willing to take on the full mortgage payment as I had done. Despite Dylan's initial resistance, the reality of mortgage payments eventually forced his hand. When the bank sent a formal foreclosure warning, he finally agreed to sell the house. The sale process was emotional for everyone. Mom cried as she sorted through 30 years of possessions. I helped her on weekends, packing photo albums and cherished mementos. Dylan rarely participated, claiming he was too busy with work, though he had strong opinions about how the proceeds should be divided. With my help, Mom found a comfortable one-bedroom apartment in a senior living community. Small but bright, with a patio for her plants and a community center where she could socialize. As promised, I paid the security deposit and first month's rent, then helped her create a sustainable budget based on her income. The transition wasn't easy. Mom had never lived alone, having gone from her parents' home to marriage at 22. She called frequently those first weeks, sometimes just to hear a familiar voice. I visited regularly, bringing dinner or helping with tasks. Our relationship began evolving into something different, healthier. Without the financial dynamic dominating our interactions, we could relate as mother and daughter rather than benefactor and recipient. We started having weekly lunch dates where we talked about books, current events, or memories of Dad instead of bills and repairs. Slowly, Mom began acknowledging the unfairness of the past arrangement. During one lunch about 3 months after she moved, she surprised me by bringing it up directly. I've been thinking about how much you helped us, she said, stirring her soup absently. Your father and I should have been more appreciative. Yes, you should have, I agreed, not softening the truth. We took you for granted, she continued. And the will that wasn't fair to you. Theodore was so worried about Dylan that he didn't think about how it would affect you. It wasn't a full apology, but it was more acknowledgement than I'd ever received. I accepted it as a step in the right direction. Dylan's situation took a different turn. After the house sold, he received a substantial sum that could have provided financial stability if managed properly. Instead, he used it to invest in another business venture, an app development company started by a friend. Within 6 months, the company folded, taking most of Dylan's inheritance with it. To my surprise, he called afterward, his voice uncharacteristically humble. "I should have listened to you," he admitted. "About financial planning and stuff, you were always better at that than me." "It's not too late to learn," I told him. "I can recommend some resources if you're interested. Would you maybe be willing to give me some advice, just general financial advice, not money," he added quickly. Rather than taking on the responsibility myself, I referred him to my financial advisor, Sarah. It was a boundary I needed to maintain, helping without enabling, supporting without sacrificing my own well-being. As for me, the changes in my financial situation were immediately positive. Without the burden of my parents' mortgage, I completed renovations on my condo, finally updating the 1980s bathroom and dated kitchen. I took a 2-week vacation to Italy, a trip I'd been dreaming about since college but had never been able to afford. More importantly, I developed a healthier relationship with money. Working with my therapist, I realized how much of my self-worth had been tied to financial caregiving. Being needed had become a substitute for being valued. Now I was learning to value myself without needing to rescue others. 6 months after Mom moved to her apartment, she invited me over for dinner. She'd become quite good at cooking for one, but occasionally prepared enough to share. After we ate, she handed me a small wrapped package. "It's not much," she said, "but I wanted you to have it." Inside was a delicate silver bracelet that had belonged to my grandmother. Along with it was a card containing the first genuine apology I'd ever received from my mother. "Mia, I'm sorry for taking your generosity for granted. Thank you for everything you did for us and for helping me find a new path forward. Love, Mom." I fastened the bracelet around my wrist, touched by the gesture. It wasn't about monetary value, it was about the recognition it represented. For perhaps the first time, my mother was seeing me clearly. That night, driving home, I reflected on everything that had happened over the past year. The pain of betrayal had been intense, but it had also been the catalyst for necessary change. By finally saying, "You chose. Now pay," I had freed not only myself but my entire family from unhealthy patterns that had persisted for decades. I'd learned that love doesn't require financial sacrifice, that boundaries protect relationships rather than damage them, that sometimes the most caring thing you can do is stop enabling behavior that harms people in the long run. Most importantly, I'd learned to value myself enough to expect fair treatment, even from those closest to me. That lesson alone was worth every difficult moment of the journey. Today, I have a different kind of relationship with my family. We relate as adults with separate lives who choose to stay connected rather than as financial lifelines. Mom and I have our weekly lunches. Dylan and I talk occasionally, our conversations more honest than they ever were before. The path hasn't been easy, but it's led to something authentic and sustainable. If you're in a similar situation supporting family members who don't appreciate your sacrifices, remember that you deserve recognition and respect. Setting boundaries isn't selfish. It's necessary for healthy relationships. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is say, "You chose, now pay." Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members? What happened when you finally stood up for yourself? Share your experiences in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe if this story resonated with you. Your support helps me continue sharing these personal journeys, and who knows, maybe your comment will help someone else struggling with similar family dynamics. Thank you for listening to my story. And remember, prioritizing your own well-being isn't selfish, it's essential.